Now let's talk about copying the geometry. So in here, let's create a geometry node, the empty swap container, and let's dive inside. And in here, I'm going to create a simple sphere in here. And onto the sphere, let me enable the option. And here we have the option to change the primitive type. And right now we are creating the polygonal sphere, and it has all of these points and primitives. And we also have a sphere type that is called the primitive. So what the primitive type sphere is, it only has just one point. If I middle mouse button, here you can see it has one point and it only has one primitive. It's actually an a1 point, and Houdini knows how to draw this point as an a sphere, so which means it's a very lightweight geometry. So because we are going to duplicating our geometry, copying this, so our scene will get heavy if we were to change this to polygon or polygon mesh. If I middle mouse button, here you can see, because we have a lot more points and primitives, it's a heavy geometry. So that is why I am changing this to primitives, because it's a very lightweight to work with. To easiest way to copy your geometry, we have a node called copy and transform. So if I type copy, and here you can see the first node we have the copy and transform. So let's add this and let's connect this and let's view the result of copy. And here you can see right now we are creating the two copies, but I can only see one sphere, and that is because the another sphere is on top of this first sphere. So what I can do, I can change the translation in here. So I can let me play around with the translation in X, and here you can see we have another sphere. And in here I can define the number of copies, and I can keep creating these copies, and this value will get added onto our this newly created copy. So we are keep incrementing this X value and creating the copies. So here I can define some copies, and also I can do what I can do, I can create another copy node. So let me duplicate this node and connect this. And for this one, I'm going to just translate this into my z-axis. And if I take a look at this gnomon, so let me, here you can see the z-axis. So let's zero out the translation x, that is the y and that is the z. So let's play around with the settings, and here you can see we have a grid of copies. I can lower down the number of copies in here, and also I can create another copy and transform node, just duplicate this again, and let's connect this whole geometry into another copy node. And for this time, let's zero out the z and let's play around with the value of y, and let's enable this. Let's add some y value in here, and here as you can see we have multiple copies, and now I can individually control the number of copies. So these are the y copies, and these are our z copies, and the top one we have the x copies. That is a very simple way of creating the copies. And we also have a node called copy to points. So if I enable this, type this, and here you can see we have a node called copy to points. So let's add this, and this one has two inputs. The first one is the geometry to copy. Okay, so first let me duplicate this sphere. So press and hold the alt key and drag, that will duplicate this sphere. And I want to geometry to copy, I want to copy the sphere, and we need to define the points. So for that, let's say I want to create another sphere. So let's add this time let's add a polygonal sphere. Let's go into the sphere, and I'm going to increase the radius. So if you hover over to this radius parameter and increase the value, and by that we can increase all of these values with this radius. Let's adjust the radius value to make this radius a bit bigger. And if I enable my points, and here you can see this sphere has lots of points, all of these points. So what I would like to do, I would like to copy my this sphere geometry onto these points. So we have these points have their location. So I want to copy this sphere onto these points. So what I would like to do, I can connect this in here. So what this will do, it will just use this, whatever the points coming on this input, it will use these points to copy geometry. So if I view the copy to points node, and here as you can see, we have these sphere geometry copied onto these points. So which mean if I were to adjust the rows and columns, so by adjusting the rows and column, I am creating more or less points. So because the points are changing, we should have the changing number of copies. So if I view the copy to points node, and here as you can see, I can play around with the rows and columns to create more or less copies. And I can also swap my geometry. Right now I'm using the sphere. I can, let's say, add a box geometry in here. And let's say I want to copy my box geometry, and let's connect this. And now let's view the result of copy to points. And now let me hide my point display. So let's uncheck this option. So now we are copying this box geometry onto these sphere points. And same way, I can play around with our rows and column to create more or less of my box geometry. And also I can put different kind of geometry. Let's say this time I want to put a grid in here. If I enable my points, and here as you can see, we have all of these points, right? If I enable my point number, so we have these points, and they are in the regular grid array pattern. So if I were to connect this and view the result of copy to points, and we have these box copied onto these points, I can plug my sphere geometry in here, and we have all of our regular arrangement, which can be controlled from these grid points. I can play around with these points. I can adjust the rows and columns. And in here, once we have copied this, we have this geometry, I can keep creating another copy node, for example, let's say, and create another copy and transform node. And this time I'm going to connect this after that, and we are creating two copies. And let me move this one up, and I can define the number of copies. And here we have different ways of copying our geometry. And if you also have a line, let's say if I were to create a helix in here, so if you type helix, that will create a basic primitive spline, this basic curve. So onto the helix, we have some parameter. Here we can adjust the heights, we can adjust the number of these turns, we can adjust the start radius, and radius scale, the overall radius. So all of the basic primitives for working with these spirals. If I enable my point number, and here as you can see, we have these points, right? So if I enable my point number, so this line has all of these points. So which mean I can use this as our point input. So if I were to copy this sphere, here we have this sphere, and if I connect this in here, and here as you can see, we are copying our sphere geometry. Let me scale down my sphere. Right now my sphere size is too big, so let's go into the uniform scale and lower this down. And here as you can see, we are copying this sphere geometry onto this helix. And if I were to add the box in here, here we have the box, and if I connect this and view the result, and let me lower down the uniform scale for my box because the box scale is too high. And here as you can see, we are copying our geometry onto these points because we have these points, but we do not currently have the information for the orientation, which means that we are only using the position of the point. So this copy to points node is only using the position. So we have these points. So we are only looking for the position where we have the points. So the copy to points node look for, okay, so the point number 0 is here. I want to place box in here. And point number 8 is here. Okay, so I want to copy the copy number 8, which means the box number 8 onto this location. But it does not have the information for the orientation. That is why these copies do not aligning onto the curve. So they are at their correct position. So the placement is correct, but their orientation is not. If I were to change this box rotation, if I go into the box, let me enable the parameter, and here we have the rotation. And if I were to rotate this on y-axis, okay, I'm going to just adding a slight rotation. And now if I view the result, and here as you can see, we are using the same rotation. So we do not have the orientation information, which means if I change this, all of my copies will get the same rotation, because this copy to point node is only looking for the position for the points onto this second inputs. So to actually copy this geometry onto these lines with correct orientation, we have another node called copy to curves. So if you type copy to curves, and here as you can see, we have this node copy to curves. So that is designed for copying the geometry onto these lines. So for example, this helix is a type of line. So that will take care of the orientation. So which means, let me connect this grid in here, and let me remove both of these sphere. And for this one, it has the same two inputs. It requires the geometry to copy. So for this one, I'm going to copy the box and connect this. That is the geometry I want to copy, and it requires this line. So that is the line on. Let's connect this onto the second input, and let's view the result of copy to curves. And right now this scale is too big, so let's go into the box, lower down the uniform scale value. Let's keep lowering this down, and let's zoom in, and there you go. Now here as you can see, all of our box are aligning onto we have this helix. So all of the orientation are accurate. So they are adhering to our original line accurately. It is still using the points. So if I enable my point number, these points, it's still using these points, but now it is also looking for the orientation of how this line is actually oriented. Okay, so that is why we have this separate node copy to curves. And if I were to play around with the number of points, let me see. Okay, so here we have the number of points. So if I adjust the divisions, by adjusting the divisions, we can effectively control the number of points. So which means we should get more or less of our box copies. And here as you can see, let's go into the helix, and if I were to play around with this setting, here as you can see, I can create more copies or less copies. Here we have this copy to curve for copying our geometry to curve, and we have some option in here that we will talk about in a minute, because it's looking for our curve normal, and we have some additional rotation option. So if I enable the additional rotation, so which means I can enable the roll if I apply the roll, and in here I can enable this to rotate my box along our curves. I can enable the twist in here, and here as you can see, they are twisting as they are progressing our curve. It may be easier to see if I were to increase the number of points. And here as you can see, we have this twisting effect. Let's go in here, let's play around with this twist and maybe zero this out. And we also have a partial twist option. So If I enable this, I can enable the partial twist. So let's zero this out, and let's see, we also have the option for scales. So let's enable this, and we have this uniform scale to control our overall scale. And we also have the option to stretch, so maybe change this to 1 stretch around turns. Let's enable this. So right now it's not working. Maybe we need to create a less number of copies. So what it will do, it will stretch our geometry wherever we have these turns. So if I enable this, okay, so right now it's not working, but we will see why it's not working. But right now it's not important, so let's hide this. And we have some attributes. These are the attributes that we want to copy. These are the option that we will talk about more details in later, but right now you can just add these rotation. Here we have the option to copy our geometry onto the curves. In the next lesson, let's talk about how we can copy multiple geometries. So right now we are copying the box. In here, let's say if I want to copy my box as well as sphere together, if I were to create my another sphere primitive. So let's say if I were to copy my box as well as sphere, how we can copy these multiple geometries into our this copy to points. We will talk about that in the next lesson.